Russell Wilson is still dealing with a lingering calf injury. Will he play Sunday against the Falcons? That's next with the special guest on the Bleav in Steelers show. Today's episode of the Bleav in Steelers show is brought to you by BetOnline.ag. The Steelers are 3-point underdogs to the Falcons, and if you want to get in on the action, go over to BetOnline.ag. Use our promo code Bleav, that's BLEAV, to get started over at BetOnline.ag. BetOnline. The game starts here. Welcome into the Bleav in Steelers show. I'm your host, Mark Bergin, joined today by the man known as Pro Football Doc on social media. He is Dr. David Chao. And Dr. Chao, thank you for your time this morning. I want to get started right away. Russell Wilson listed as questionable with a lingering calf injury. Do you think he plays Sunday when the Steelers take on the Atlanta Falcons?
Well, there's no question calf injuries are tricky. They can linger. We talked about it all preseason. And the decision to play or not is always what I call multifactorial. Could Russell Wilson play? The answer is for sure yes. Will Russell Wilson be 100% if he plays? No. And where it becomes a coaching decision is a less than 100% Russell Wilson that could make the calf worse against a Justin Fields who's fully healthy. So this becomes a Mike Tomlin decision. Look, Joe Burrow, division opponent, Cincinnati Bengals last year, played with a calf injury. I get it. Joe Burrow's a little more of a pocket quarterback than Russell, but he played in a calf injury week 1, lost, wasn't great. Week 2, lost last year, wasn't great. And there was a ton of chatter about he's going to sit week 3. At Bleav and Sports Injury Central podcast, he said, no, I don't think it's that simple. Because if resting a calf injury for 1 week would put Joe Burrow at 100%, undoubtedly the Bengals would do that. But it's an injury that lingers. 1 week of rest wasn't going to cure Joe Burrow. And the Bengals certainly couldn't start the season last year 0-3. So they played Joe Burrow and they won, right? It's still in the end with the wrist injury for Joe Burrow, a different story. But that's the consideration here for Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. There's undoubtedly reason to rest Russell Wilson. And if 1 week would do it, you're going to for sure rest him. The problem is 1 week isn't necessarily going to do it. This was a preseason injury from the calf, and there's acclimation and other injuries that can happen from favoring it. So that's why it's a coaching decision. And the coaching decision is different in Pittsburgh than it was in Cincinnati. You have Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, and you're going to argue where they kind of are maybe, right? And there are options. So given that there are options like that, clearly I think the Steelers wanted to start Russell Wilson. You all named him the sole captain. That was the plan. And with this injury, the question is, do they say, no, we're still going to go with this and we'll have a short lease on Russell Wilson if he gets pulled? Or I think what's going to happen is this is going to be the excuse to sit him. Russell, you're not 100%. Let's go and let's see what Justin Fields can do. And if he does well, then maybe it gives more chance for Russell Wilson to rest longer and truly get to 100%. And you got to understand, being a running quarterback, there's always risk of injury, and to Justin Fields. So even if Justin Fields, quote, wins the job in the first week or two here from playing, that doesn't leave Russell Wilson out of the picture. Looking at the whole story here, I think Russell Wilson sits because there's other options, right? And sits for how long? It depends, right? And but this is why I always say return to play is always tricky. And playing, the injury itself, you can know what it is, but it has to be unanimous. The player has to say they're ready to go and willing to go. And it seems like Russell Wilson will always say that, right? Even if he's not 100%.
Yep.
Medical has to say it's okay to play. And medical would say, yeah, it's okay to play, but you have a risk of re-aggravation of the injury. And then the team has to say, we want you to play, i.e., we really need this game. We don't have another choice. Or, you know what? Let's not play, because let's not make this into a 6-8 week deal. Let's keep this relatively short term. And we have another option. And so because of that, it's my belief that likely Russell Wilson will sit for this year.
Wow. This goes back to the start of training camp. And Russell Wilson missed the first 10 practices. You get an extended look of Justin Fields. Hearing this news this week that the calf injury was still an issue surprised me. Did that surprise you at all?
No, it didn't. And it seemed like on Thursday it actually got worse. Now, the reports are it, quote, tightened up, but that's like code word, right? I mean, felt it down there that maybe mild aggravation, but it seems like it was aggravated on Thursday. He went in a different direction from Wednesday. And once that happens, it doesn't turn around in days. And so it doesn't surprise me. Calf injuries linger. A few years ago, Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay in December had a calf injury and he played through it. And at Sports Injury Central, we said, look, this is going to linger and it can linger all the way into the playoffs. And famously that year, Aaron Rodgers had many chances to run and never ran in those playoffs because of the calf. So it doesn't surprise me that it lingers. This is why right off the bat, when the 49ers had CMC with a mild calf, they just said, we're shut down for the whole preseason. We're not even going to look at bringing him back at all early to be safe. So no, it doesn't surprise me, unfortunately.
Another question I wanted to ask you, Dr. Chao, is he initially aggravated this injury as part of a sled conditioning test at the very start of training camp. Is this something that other teams ask their quarterbacks to do? The thing I was confused about is why the Steelers have a quarterback moving a sled of some sort as part of their conditioning test going into training camp. You have a lot of experience covering the league and working in the league. Do other teams have their quarterbacks do this type of test?
Depends on the team. And the conditioning tests often are standard. And it's not like you're with the sled, you got 7 bodies on it and he's being asked to move thousands of pounds. But Russell Wilson, just like any other quarterback, is a football player. Often kickers are asked to do the same conditioning test because guess what? You're on the team. Now, some teams will make other exceptions and otherwise, and who knows? It's quite possible that Mike Tomlin said, we're not doing that for you, Russell Wilson, or the quarterbacks, but he wanted to show his boys that he's part of the team. He's no different than everybody else. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's easy to place blame. I mean, it's the age old, should we play a guy in preseason? No, play him. Yeah, but he gets a slow start. No, don't play him. He gets a slow start to the season. You should have played him. But then you do play him and some injury pops up. Oh, you're so dumb. You shouldn't have played the guy, right? There's a fine line balance. So from afar, it's hard for me to be critical of that. I mean, quite honestly, I get the attentions on the quarterback, but I would have to ask you, my concern from afar in analyzing the Steelers is your offensive line. I mean, Nate Herbig out and Semaloa, the left guard, and
and he's the best one on the team. He's the best offensive lineman on the team in Sayamalu. So
yeah, and so you got 40% of your starters out. Broderick Jones, is he flipping over? What's he doing? And Dan Moore, you guys have tried to replace Dan Moore for years with draft picks and otherwise, which means, he's not a bad player, but he's not like your stalwart. And I don't know from afar internally how much shuffle that does. If Nate Herbig out means one of the guards is moving over, is there a tremendous shuffle? That O-line, I think, is going to be the bigger issue than what happens at quarterback.
And Fields' mobility can help negate some of the issues that you're going to have from the onslaught of the pass rushers. Who am I talking about here? Matthew Judon, who just came over. So, you go from the frying pan right into the fire, regardless of who Pittsburgh puts back there at the quarterback position come Sunday.
Yeah, and so it'll be an interesting game, and we'll see what happens. But yeah, that O-line and that O-line may factor into the decision on Russell Wilson, saying you're not being that mobile doesn't match up well. Clearly, the Steelers were intending for Russell Wilson to start with the solitary captain. But given the O-line issues, given the calf injury, given situationally a fast track indoors, this opens up a door to say, Russell, you're still our starter. We wanted you to start. But look, we're putting you in harm's way in this game. Let's not do this kind of thing. And that's why another reason why I think Justin Fields is going to be the starter.
Yeah, if Seumalo can't go, I would expect Spencer Anderson to step in. It looks like with Herbig's injury up front, the rookie Zach Frazier, a second-round pick out of West Virginia, would be due to get his first start. You mentioned Broderick Jones. Which side's he playing on? Still a young player, only in his second year, so you've got a lot of youth on that offensive line going into this game. The last question
and at center, right, as you know, that's a huge deal because it's about line continuity, and the center is the quarterback of that line typically, right, in terms of the blocking scheme and which direction and calling out blocking schemes, etc. I'm not sure they're going to continue to give that job to the young guy center, but that's typically the person that does that. And so that's the issue that I'm most worried about for your Steelers.
The last question I'll ask you, Dr. Chao, is if Fields is the starter Sunday, is there any possibility on Sunday that Wilson serves as the backup, meaning he'd only go in the event that Fields goes down with an injury?
Well, that does not typically happen. Part of it is if you're not healthy, if you're the supposed starter and you're healthy enough to play and take up a roster spot, are you then, why don't you just start the game? And the other thing is, I don't know, maybe Mark, you can answer this question for me. Is there a third quarterback on the roster for the Steelers or no?
They had Kyle Allen in the preseason, and I Bleav he made the initial 53-man roster. So I Bleav it would be Kyle Allen who would be the backup if Russell Wilson is not active come Sunday. That's my understanding.
They're going to have a backup. But in order to be on the third quarterback, you have to be on the active roster. And look, teams don't like, if Russell Wilson isn't healthy enough to start the game, we'll call him half instead of full. You can't suit up 1.5 quarterbacks. That just doesn't make sense, right? Because if the first
Wilson
guy goes
can't
down,
go, I'd imagine it'd be Allen, but
which means you'd have to use the roster spot, et cetera, right? Kind of situation. Years ago, not to get sidetracked, Jared Goff injured his thumb, and I was famously wrong. I said he injured his thumb late season for the Rams. He finished the game. Then he had a pin or something put in his thumb, missed the final week. And I said, he's starting the playoff game against the Seahawks. He's starting that game for sure. And sure enough, he did not start that game right before the game, but he was active. And there wasn't a third quarterback on the roster. What that told me is that Jared Goff fell out of favor with Sean McVay, but was healthy enough to play because he didn't have all the practice time all week. They gave the start to someone else, but they didn't activate a third quarterback, meaning his thumb was good enough to play. And sure enough, that next offseason, the trade of Matthew Stafford happened.
Wow, it was almost a precursor.
Well, that's what I said. It told me that Jared, look, if you're the solid, back in the days of Big Ben, if he didn't practice all week, he's still the starter. Period. End of discussion, right? If Jared Goff is all of a sudden not the starter because he didn't practice all week, that means it's a 1A, 1B situation in the eyes of the coach. And this is why I'm saying, having been on the other side of the fence, so to speak, these are the discussions that go on. And that's a little insight in the discussions of why I Bleav Russell Wilson will not get the start, because there is Justin Fields and the O-line issues, et cetera. But because there is a little bit of a 1A, 1B situation, right? If this were Big Ben with the calf and the previous Steelers quarterback situation, Ben Roethlisberger would start week 1 here.
No question.
Right?
Well, this is the luxury when you're paying both players less than $5 million combined this season. So that's, I think that factors into this as well versus the premium that you were paying Big Ben.
No question about it. Now, Russell Wilson's still getting a lot of Denver money, I think.
Yeah, so you're not lying there. You're not lying there. He is Dr. David Chao. Dr. Chao, if there's anything that you need to plug with the work that you do, certainly appreciate your time this morning.
if you go to sicscore.com, Sports Injury Central, we have field views up of the Atlanta and Pittsburgh game. Offense, defense, you can flip them. You can see Nate Herbig's red, the left guard for the Steelers. You can see the injury issues on Atlanta. There's scores for offense, defense, run defense. And it can also help you out with your fantasy plays throughout the league, et cetera. We're hopefully the best and really main source of injury analysis, like you heard here, as opposed to injury reporting. We are not reporting that Russell Wilson is not starting the game. We're doing analysis saying that he could play, but because of these other factors, we don't see him being the starter for this game.
Thank you to Dr. Chao, our guest today. My name is Mark Bergin, and this has been another edition of the Bleav in Steelers show. If you enjoyed listening, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. I'll be live on this feed immediately after the Steelers and Falcons. Thank you again to Dr. Chao, today's guest. My name is Mark Bergin. Hope all of you have terrific rest of your weekends. Start of the season is here. I'll see you Sunday. Till then, take care, and so long, everybody.